Now, some may appeal to other sources to account for many of these democratizing gains in the West. Some people will propose, for example, that Greek democracy can account for the emergence of modern democracy. Well, actually, modern democracy looks nothing like Greek democracy, which was actually built on the backs of slaves. It was very hierarchical. That, for example, Aristotle, Plato too had this mindset, but Aristotle said that a slave is an animated tool. And of course, some people are born to rule, others are born to serve, and that's just the way it is. That's just the natural hierarchy of things. And so there have been, there are scholars recognize that Greek democracy really is not fit to account for the kind of democracy that we're talking about today. Another explanation would be that the Renaissance, from around 1300 to 1500 or so, that this period of time was when people started to shake free of those religious influences, the Christian faith and so forth, and that you have humanism emerging. Actually, there's a misunderstanding, because the humanism of the Renaissance was actually more like a curriculum, what we'd say the humanities are today. And it was going back to the sources, discovering the riches of classical sources, the Greek and Roman sources, and these were brought back into the academic world. And many people found that those sources were a great source of richness and value in terms of artistic as well as literary creativity. And so it was more like, everyone was a Christian or called himself a Christian back then. So it wasn't as though they were departing from the Christian faith. We'd say it's kind of like John Milton, who was a Puritan poet, who drew very much on pagan mythology and so forth in his Paradise Lost, for example. But again, it wasn't as though he wasn't a Christian because he utilized those sources. Now, a third possibility is that the Enlightenment period from around 1600 to 1800, that this period of time began a new movement which was shaking free from religious influences and so forth. Actually, in the better explanation here is what took place was strongly influenced by the Christian faith. Many of those at the forefront of the Enlightenment, from Rousseau and Locke to Benjamin Franklin and others here in the United States, they were the ones who were influenced by Protestantism, growing up in Calvinistic homes and so forth. So they were strongly influenced already by the Christian faith that gave rise to these freedoms and calling for equality, equal rights before the law, and natural rights and so forth. So again, it was very strongly influenced by the Christian faith. And so I think we can talk about how the Enlightenment did not indeed, while it had a secularizing effect, does not account for that issue of being the source of talking about human rights and so forth. It's actually rooted in the biblical tradition of human beings being made in the image of God.